will have seen this slide before. It's the note well. Please pay attention. Make sure that you understand what you're actually participating with when you agree to follow the IETF processes. We're just starting to hand out the blue sheet, so please make sure that you sign the blue sheet before you leave the room. We'll check a few times during the meeting to make sure that everyone's actually signing the blue sheets and perhaps where they are. We had a volunteer already on the list for the minute taker today. I think Will, I see. Are you still able to use your fingers this evening? You haven't been using your keyboard too much. Can you be our minute taker? Okay, well, we've got Neville taking notes as well, and I'll take some notes, so we should have that covered. But it would be nice if we had a Jabber scribe. So, Adrian sat in the seat, in the hot seat, so great. Thank you, Adrian. So we have a 1-hour session. This is the agenda. We're going to start with our current working group documents. So let's kind of use this as a quick status update now. So congratulations, we now have 2 working group documents. Commiserations, we now have 2 working group documents. So this is our generic policy information model document. This was kind of an optional document. It was something that was discussed in Charter and the milestones, but it seemed that at the previous IETF, it was a document that people were willing to read and work on, so we decided to adopt this particular piece of work as our first item. We recently closed the poll and adopted the data model document, so we now have some sort of tangible, concrete pieces of work that we really need to kind of polish and work on, and we'll talk about these documents and the challenges and what we'd like to see with these documents during today's session. We also have a discussion from Will highlighting the framework proposal. We had 2 documents presented, sent to the list, discussed, a brief discussion last week by Bert. Thank you, sorry, last IETF. Thank you, Bert. And we now seem to have 1 proposal this IETF. So let's take a look at that document. And then we've got the problem statement that's going to be presented by Jun. Georgios is going to be present that. The agenda on the website is actually accurate. These slides are not accurate, so I will update that. And then finally, Rakesh. Do we have Rakesh in the room? I saw you, earlier, great. So Rakesh is going to present some work, and there's maybe some applicability or overlap or cross-fertilization between I2NSF and Supa. So is everyone happy with the current agenda? Are there any changes or requests? No? Okay, great. Can we have our first presenter, please?
Here in the sync box, and here is the clip. Oh, thank you. Have you got the clicker seen it?
Sorry.
Oh.
Give me.
So, hi, my name's John Strassner, and this is an unreadable screen, but now it is. Thank you. This is the Supa generic policy information model, and hey, it works, yay. This first slide, there were still some questions about, gee, do we really need an information model or not? And so this slide is saying it'd really be nice, because otherwise you have 2 problems, both of them interoperability. The first problem is that you're going to have different types of policies from different actors. The second is that because of that, you'll have different types of grammars, terminology, and concepts used. A resulting problem is that unless we have an information model to normalize concepts, if we want to reach out to Chef or Puppet or Ansible or AWS, etc., it's going to be rather difficult to do. In the interest of time, I'll skip this, The most important thing is the bottom. Standardized policies help heterogeneous systems to interoperate. Main changes from -06, which was the individual draft, we renamed and redesigned one of the classes called Supa vendor decorated component. It wasn't really, we decided that making it vendor specific was really too hard for right now, and in the interest of time, we wanted to make it more generic, which made more sense anyway. So we made those changes. We responded to questions in the mailing list. We did some final relationship fine-tuning to make the Yang easier, and we built a Yang model from the information model. Then to go from -00 of the working group draft to 01, in honor of Monty Python and a now deceased parrot, the declarative model has ceased to be. The introduction was rewritten and clarified. We did one final major redesign of the metadata class. Other than that, the model is stable. We're experimenting with adding a couple of small classes to take care of the problems that one has with null in implementations. That will be in the next version. But other than that, the content is stable. This is the GPIM taxonomy. So, is there a link? There is. Yay. So here at the top of the tree, right, you have policy. Policy structure is the superclass for building policy rules, and then policy component structure is the superclass for building components that can be put inside a policy rule. The other major classes here, under policy components, you have a policy clause, which is the basic building block for building statements that are policies. You have a decorator, which enables us to add 0 or more objects or portions of objects to a policy clause. And that is an implementation optimization, because instead of requiring all of the attributes for a class to be added at runtime, I can pick off an attribute here, a method there. It's a well-established pattern used in Java and Python and other languages, and we've imported it. For policy clauses, this subclass gives you a canonical form of a policy, but you don't have to use it. In fact, if you just want to ship Yang or CLI, just simply use this encoded clause. You shove the CLI or Yang or TL1 or whatever you want into an attribute, and life is good. And then finally, a policy collection enables us to do event correlation and event aggregation, and return that back to the business logic to generate new policy rules at runtime. And then the last part here is the metadata hierarchy with 2 real examples of metadata. If we look at the ECA policy model, the most important point is that no class is derived from, well, let me put it in the positive way. All classes are derived from a GPIM class. So it is a strict sub-hierarchy of the GPIM model. So we've added an ECA policy rule to represent imperative clauses, and we've used the composite software pattern to represent either individual rules or a hierarchy of rules. We have a subclass of policy clause to be Boolean policy clauses, and again, the same composite pattern to do individual or hierarchies of Boolean clauses. And then event, condition, and action are built here. Next steps, there's one last software pattern that we want to put in as a completely optional set of classes to protect from the nastiness of nulls and give a more generic error handling capability for the data model. And the main work for -02 is going to be adding lots and lots and lots of examples. And as always, feedback is welcome. That's it. Questions? I guess I should have been faster.
Dave Dolson. Yes, examples, please. I was finding it really hard to understand, so I think, at least the way I look at this sort of thing, examples would be critical.
Yep.
Thank you.
Examples are coming your way. By the way, before the Seoul meeting. Yes, you can quote me, Mr. Chair. Anything else? Take it away, Joel.
Okay, thank you, John.
Okay. Thank you, John. I will now briefly talk about the data model because there isn't a lot to say. We took the 0,0 of the adopted data model draft is just exactly the same as the last draft that was under my name. So there are no changes there. So there's nothing for me to discuss in that regard. We're working on building a 0,1. So we say we haven't actually managed to get the 0,1 up there. We were hoping to, we didn't quite make it. So we added, we're in the process of adding explanatory text on how the Yang was constructed. There's some pieces in the Yang itself that sort of suggest what we did, but we need to actually put in all of the explanation that says, we took the information model and here's what we did to construct the data model to make it easier for you to read the data model or to understand the relationship between the two, whichever way you want to deal with it. And the process of construction is a human algorithmic transform. It is probably the case that you could get 95% of the way there with a machine transform if you could process the UML, but we just did it by hand. And we will do the updates to bring the -01 into alignment with the changes John just talked about by hand, because we don't expect to have lots of complicated issues there. So these two slides just got reversed. This should have been the first slide. I don't know how that happened. My apologies. The point is you have the 0,0. It only appeared yesterday because we submitted it last week with the AD approval. Only the Secretariat was too busy to actually do the AD approved pre-submission during the block, and we didn't realize it hadn't gone through. When we finally realized it, we resubmitted. Sorry about the delay, folks. And we also, because Yang documents need a Yang tree, we're adding a Yang tree. I gotta say, it's not gonna tell you much because the tree is gonna say container, 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 container. But okay, it'll be there so that you have the information to show you what's going on, because where most models rely on the containment structures in Yang, this relies very heavily on inheritance structures, which have to be represented a different way, as I discussed last meeting. So all modeling changes will be done to both the IM and DM. So if you look at the modeling, use whichever document you're more comfortable looking at. Tell us what modeling issues you find. We will make sure it gets applied in both cases. You don't need to worry about, do I need to send you the comments twice? No, just tell us what issues you find. The working group discusses what the working group tells us to do to the model, we do. And we will make sure it's there. Obviously, Yang problems, if you find specifically that this Yang doesn't work or it's the wrong way to do it, say so, we'll fix the Yang model, the data model. And if the working group says, you shouldn't be using enumerations, you should be using integers for something, fine, we'll do that. And as I said, we'll add explanatory text. We're working on trying to find the right balance between the detail we've got in the IM, and we've got a lot of detail there. I don't want to repeat all of that detail in the Yang model, but we want to put enough information, enough description into the DM that a reader can have a reasonable understanding of what they're doing. There, it'll say, for further details, see the IM. But there has to be a reasonable level. We can't say, you must go through the IM just to understand the basics of the model, because we're going to have both documents, and we're going to keep them both up to date. Questions?
Benoit Claes, maybe one question regarding the example we've been mentioning. Should all the examples be in the information model or in the data model?
We're going to put all the examples in the IM and some of them in the DM so that people see how the Yang derives the set from them. But we want to make sure the IM is understandable. We'll put examples there. Some of those will go in the DM as well.
John Strossner, we are toying with the idea of actually going from wetware to software. And I don't know if we could make it by Sol, but as Joel said, when you look at the Yang, you're going to be struck with, gee, there's a pattern here where there's actually 3 patterns in the Yang. So therefore, we should be able to build software. If we do build software and it actually works, then we'll either put it in, well, we would obviously put it in GitHub, but we'd probably put it in one of the hackathons, with Yang, so that other people can look at it and say, gee, how good is this? Can we take other information models and use that to generate reasonable Yang? So keep your fingers crossed and we'll see what happens.
Bert Wijnen. So if I had to implement the data model, my understanding was we have the information model so that if people want to model the data using Yang, maybe SMI, maybe Corba, maybe something else, I have something in the future, I don't know. That's why we have the information model. And I thought that, or I would hope that if we have a data model that comes out of that, based on the information model, I understand that, that it would be a standalone document that if I want to implement, I would hope I can do with reading just the data model and not have to go back to the information model.
The issue is I am very uncomfortable. We could literally copy all of the descriptive texts from the IM to the DM, but I don't like saying things twice, and B, people already complain about the lengths of these documents.
No, and I understand you don't want to do.
But we will put in enough information that the DM will be understandable and should be implementable. You shouldn't need to implement the objects, but to implement the whole system, there's probably going to be information in the IM. From my perspective, it's much easier to work with the IM in terms of understanding information structure. For other people, the DM is easier to work with. So you can do either one for understanding the information relationships, but some information relationships are not representable in Yang. And so I can't do anything about that. That's represented in the IM.
Okay.
And it's either that or we produce a lot longer DM. And if the working group tells us copy all of the descriptions in full, okay, we will.
Naro Mashkano, and I need to read all this as well. But with SMI and GTMO, which was the information model, the language that we're expressing information models for some of the standard MIB modules, we used two types of two methods. And no, I don't know if there are any of those are possible. One of them was actually including a relationship with the information model section, which actually was basically tables of mapping of objects, including their inclusion. So you were mentioning relationship. And the other one was using reference clauses, which have an equivalent in Yang. So we certainly do not need to copy description text, absolutely not.
That's the only, the data model will be complete. The only question is how do we get enough descriptive text to be useful without copying verbose things that have all of the details. And that's, take a look, that part isn't there yet, but do take a look at the data modeling and the information modeling and say, is this a readable data modeling thing? There are, all the details are currently in the IM. As I've said, we do need to put significantly more detail into the Yang draft. I'm not saying we're going to leave all of the details in the IM, because it does need to make sense to be coherent as a data model document. It's just a question of how much detail we put in, how much explanation. So as I say, I expect most of the examples to be in the IM, but there will be enough examples that you know how the Yang works, and you're not left going, what does that Yang mapping really mean? We got to have enough examples in the data model so that you do know and you can make sure you've implemented right. The goal.
Thank you, Joel. Just before we have our, Benoit.
Just one quick one, Joel. So we've got now the working document, which is the exact copy of your previous draft, which was last updated in April, right, for the previous IETF.
We're going to be updating very soon. We're going to be very shortly producing a 01 that updates to fix things like the absence of a Yang tree and things like that. And then that will be available for the working group to discuss. It's just we ran out of time.
This is fine, but I want to also make a statement that we had some sort of deadlines to make it easy for the working group, like, you know, the deadline for submission, and for 2 drafts, right? This one, the other one, updated like this week, and yours is still the one from the previous IETF. So, you know, maybe we want to.
Benoit, we were asked not to change the document when we were posting the 00. And we were also waiting for everybody to agree on the existing document before we started making changes, because we needed to keep the existing document so we could post it. I was trying to work with what I was asked to do. We're going to make changes. We're not going to wait till the next meeting to post any changes. We're going to use the list and try to get things moving a lot faster.
Thanks, guys. Has anyone not signed the blue sheet yet? Can you put your hands up if you haven't signed the blue sheet? Okay, one person. And who has the other blue sheet right now? Oh, okay, great. Okay, our next presenter, please. Thank you, Will. So,
Who's got the click? Oh, here it is.
Okay, this is Will from Huawei. So I'm gonna present this Supa policy management framework. And thanks to all the authors' efforts, we have this draft. So first of all, I will talk about a little bit about the background. So first, you can see the position is that we're a little behind the schedule actually. So this should be submitted earlier. And the history about this draft came quite a long time. So I want to talk a lot about the details, but just before, Supa was created, we have 2 drafts from my colleague, drafted Ms. Zhou, and this draft are, prior to the working group created, and in 14th and 15th. And next, we, thanks to Maxim from TOF, we have a Supa value proposition. This is under the suggestion, from the working group and the chairs. And there we have a brief section about the framework, very simple one. And then in this year earlier, on April, we have a, because the change, Maxim changed the work. So, changed the responsibility. So I lead this new draft. which is we formally replaced the very beginning, the first one, the draft Joe, and we modified according to the latest discussion, and we added the details to describe what's the framework look like. And this is now a standalone framework draft. And we updated earlier this month to 01. We, thanks to all the reviewers, we have addressed most of the comments, and we added a figure about the relationship among the service, policy, and resources. We recently just updated into 02, but it's not submitted right now. I distributed to all the reviewers to let them know whether they're happy with the changes because we addressed most of the comments. So here I'm gonna use 3 figures to describe the framework here. So the first one is how Supa is used. So this is like the procedure. As John and Joe already presented the information model and the data model, I won't go to the details. But first, we need to know that, well, if you look at the top, we have IETF to design this information model and the data models. And these information models that have the guided, can guide the design of the data models, which can be, used together with those resource and service young models together to this service interface logic. And this one, can create appropriate mechanism for the operators to, to define their own policies accordingly and to create creating or managing the network underlying. And the operator can interact with this such an interface, and which is then translated into the configurations and snippet. So that's the procedure. And then we have a traditionally way to describe the framework. It looks like how do you interact with other blocks. So here we have the GPIM on the top, and here, by the way, D here means derived from. So which means that the generated policy data model can be derived from the GPIM, as well as the ECA policy rule information model also can be derived by this GPIM. Then we're using this tool to guide the design of the ECA policy rule data model, which can be finally used, communicated to the network management or the controller in other way. And there we have the resource or the service models. And just like I said in previous slides, then this can be, we can have the configurations eventually to the network element, to the network underlying. This figure actually was added because since we, proposing Supa in, a long time, people kept asking what's the relationship between service and the policy. So actually, we have a wiki which is generated, maintained by me, and there are many Q&As. I guess maybe this one can be also added into the wiki. So I just added this figure and some materials into our new draft to describe the relationship. In our view, what's the relationship between policy and service, between policy and resource? Of course, the service and the resource relationship is out of our scope, but I just draw this line to make everybody have a big picture. So here, thanks to John's help, make the language more clear and like a poem, very beautiful. So here we have the policy manages and can adjust the service behavior as necessary. Please note that here we have a kind of a relationship that this policy and the service can have a one-to-one or one-to-multiple relationship. Means that you can, using one single policy, to manipulate, to manage, configure, one or even multiple services. And similarly, we have policy managers and can adjust the service behavior. I'm sorry, there must be something wrong here. And adjust the resource behavior as necessary. So there is a mistake here. I'm sorry. So similarly, we have a one-to-multi or one-to-one relationship between policy and resource. So the last sentence is about service and resource. So I'm not gonna read it because it's out of scope. And the next slide shows you the comments and the next step. So thanks for all the reviewers. We have received many comments on the mailing list or offline or face-to-face discussions. I briefly, categorize these comments into these five. So the first is that what's the relationship between, just like what I explained. So we add a figure and we add paragraphs to explain the relationship between policy and service. And then it's about the explanation on the process of the GPIM and the EPRIM. And we add a section there, not section, add a paragraph there to explain the issue. And of course, we need to update some references because we have a new draft and we even have the RFC 6020 bits. And also some of the figures we need to polish. Actually, I already done this, and you can see from these slides the figures are already polished. And you can also see those in our new draft. And the last one is the only comments that I haven't decided how to do it, and I want to ask the audience here is that whether we should talk about the how the declarative policy to fit in, because this is now out of scope. And actually, I received these comments from Bert and also from Crush from Juniper. Yesterday, we have a very long discussion about this topic. I guess later you can explain. So, so I really want to listen to the chairs, the AD, and all the audience. So whether we should, for example, we should just keep silent on this topic, or we should write a small sentence or paragraph about this is not in our scope. But if there is something to be discussed, how do we do this? So we are open to your opinion. And the next step will be, I already updated the draft, and I can submit it. After all the reviewers agree, the comments I already addressed, and then that's it. So this is the final page. I'm asking whether we could adopt this as a working group draft. And questions?
Bertwijnen, if you go back to the previous slide. So that bottom one, like whether the declarative policy should be included in the framework or not, at least, that comment came from me and as I heard from others. The reason why I ask that is because some of us are actually working more on a, declarative or intent-based policy. And that is not part of the working group, we understand that, but that work may actually benefit the working group by the time that they get rechartered and maybe do this work. So it would be good if we can see where you think that those things fit in the framework, so that if we do any of that work, we are not doing something completely different from what was in the overall concept of the policy at the Supa working group. That would be good to have. That's why I made that comment.
Boris Hasanov, you mentioned Wiki. Could you please put this address to the slides? Wiki address. You mentioned Wiki, which you're supporting.
Wiki. Okay. Yeah. I will put that on the mailing list.
Okay, so if there are no more questions, the next, I have one, which is how many people have actually read this draft? Yes, okay, so there's about 10 people there, which is good. And next, I guess, of those people, how many would support it being a working group item? Okay, that's about the same group, yes. So we will put it up as a working group item and run that on the mailing list for another couple of weeks before formally adopting it. The next question is, for everybody in the room, how many people are prepared to review the document? This group is not changing very much, and there's a lot of authors among it. Yeah, well,
Unless there's 10 authors on the document. Oh, good. Okay, just clarification.
so there's a few. All right. Okay, so that's fine for the document. Now, the question about declarative policy, the charter does say that's out of scope, but Will has raised the question of throwing in a few paragraphs. I think that's how he put it, just to make it a bit more complete. Benray, could we have an area director comment on that, please?
Benoit Clay speaking. So you're right, the charter says out of scope. Now, it depends how much time and how much effort you want to put into that. You know, as you mentioned, Neville, if this is a couple of paragraphs telling if there is ever intent, this is how it plugs, this is perfectly fine, right? If we're spending more time on the intent part of the document versus the other one, then we have a problem.
Right. So I'll interpret that as meaning a short section that doesn't take too much time and energy is just fine.
If I may, Bertwijnen, so a short section, and it's okay if you even state explicitly in this document that it is only put here to see where it fits in the framework, but that we don't work on it. I think one box in the picture that's in the document would be good also, to see where one or two boxes in that picture, where it fits in the picture as well, right?
I'm sure Bert will be delighted to, the authors will be happy to have your text to make that happen.
Okay, good.
And I'll just remind everybody, seeing I have the mic at the moment, that what we're looking for, as in any other working group, is people who are prepared not just to say, no, we don't think this is too good, or this is much too long. We're looking for people who will send in text to the editors so that it can be improved. Okay. So we're on to the next document, which is Georgios.
Okay, thank you very much, Neville. So what I would like to present now is the problem that the Supa working group is working on. Actually, this problem statement has been used in many drafts previously, so we are also used parts of these ideas to actually initiate the working group. But due to the fact that we have received comments from many participants to actually make this draft as a working draft to show to the audience what exactly Supa is doing and what is the problem that Supa is solving. That's why we thought that it will be good to also try to make this draft as a working draft. So the authors have contributed to this internet draft can be seen here on this slide. So let's go to the motivation. So the growth of the variety and significance of traffic that actually is forwarded and needs to be supported by different complex enterprise and network operator architectures is actually imposing very much complexity on the operational management tasks that have to be done in order to maintain such kind of networks. And at the same time makes the actually the initiation and deployment of new services also quite difficult. So Supa, what actually Supa tries to do is to solve this type of challenges, and is providing and specifying a policy-based management framework that actually combines two main concepts. One concept is related to software abstraction of networks. So by doing that, being able to expose information about networks and about other information that is needed for operation and management. And at the same time, it's actually providing type of programmatic control for such operation and management tasks. So let's go through the status and changes from the 0.0 version. As I already mentioned, this draft actually is based on information that has been provided in previous drafts. So it replaces these two internet drafts that you can see there. And it actually incorporates the Supa problem statement. It provides information about the value of the Supa approach. And it gives also a brief description and examples of how the event condition action can be applied for policy management. And then the changes from the 0.0 version, so this is actually 0.2 version, are that a new section on terminology has been added, and we had an old section 3 in the previous version, in the version 0.0, where we described the gap analysis and also the related work. Actually, we deleted that after some comments that we have received during the previous IETF meeting. So let's go through some details on the problem. So current service network operators need to operate and to support operation of networks that are becoming increasingly complex, and they are increasing their size. And they are using actually multiple type of technologies, multiple paradigms, and also different programmatic control tools. And at the same time, they are actually deployed by multiple vendors. And the operation and management actually of such networks introduces key challenges, and you can see them there at the bottom. Actually, the network infrastructure management becomes to be more complicated. The management of existing networks becomes to be also difficult, and also the introduction and the deployment of new services also becomes also complicated. And in addition to that, when we have these new emerging technologies like SDN and NFV, it's also quite difficult to somehow introduce them and to be used by the existing operation and management ecosystem. So then what Supa tries to do then is to somehow solve these challenges I mentioned by specifying a policy-based framework. And this is actually done by providing a unified technology-independent operation management framework. So this will actually simplify and provide a more efficient way of how operators can manage their network. And it is also maybe important to note that Supa focuses on management policies that are implemented externally to network elements, so not internal. And actually, this interpretation can mean that typically will result in configuration changes on a group of network elements, so not on one individual element, but on a collection of network elements. So here we have 4 key values and benefits of Supa. So one that is important is that it provides a vendor and technology independent policy framework. And then this will help actually the network management, and at the same time it will simplify and optimize the way of how operational management can be performed. Then the second one is the unified network infrastructure policy management. So by doing that, we provide means to operators to have a unified way of managing networks by using this policy framework. And then the third one is and this is an important one, a real-time and event-based network management. So actually the network infrastructure could be adapted, it could be changed based on some context that is monitored by this policy at the current moment in time. So depending on things that are happening dynamically, the infrastructure could also, and the configuration of the infrastructure can be changed, can be adapted. And then the fourth value is the new independent network management policy layer. So what we mean with that is that we include a kind of policy layer between the service network providers and the subscribers, and provide to them a way of achieving a unified and shared management. And also, maybe it's also important to note that different actors can make use of this policy, and these actors could be developers, could be network administrators, could be applications that that can use different types of policy rules on different abstraction levels. And another important characteristic of this fourth benefit is the fact that the policy framework could provide also an operation and management interface that could be used and enable the existing IETF data models that actually are being defined in different IETF working groups, and then define a way of how they could be managed in a unified way, and also being independent of technology vendors and application domain. And then here we have some, in the draft we have 4 examples that show how the event condition action policy is used. I'll go only through the first one, and this one is about the network service management, and we are using as network service in this case the L3 VPN. And what you can see there is that the event is shown. It happens at the moment that alarms and error notifications are being received from an L3 VPN service. Then, as condition, under the condition that these error notifications are coming from one interface within a period of time, and then the action will be that if the error rate that actually is monitored exceeds some limit, then something will happen. And what will happen here is that this L3 VPN will go into error state, and then also the users that are using this L3 VPN service will migrate to another L3 VPN, one or more L3 VPNs. So I will skip this other 3, and I'm going to the next steps. So we received comments on the mailing list, as I mentioned previously. So we received comments on the mailing list that having this problem statement draft is useful, because then we can show to the audience what Supa is actually trying to do. And in addition to that, we received comments that we should bring back the gap analysis and the related work, but then use it in the appendix of the draft. So I don't know if there are any objections on that. So that is the first question. And then the second question is to propose to make this draft as a Supa working group draft. So thank you, and if you have questions, I'm happy to take them.
Bill from Huawei. This workable? Actually, that piece of comments is from me, and I do think that because when we're doing this work, there is long time ago. So maybe if you wanted to, I mean, if you want to add the gap analysis, I mean, in a summarized version, and you need to look at what are technologies nowadays. I mean, not only two years ago, because those parts are, I mean, kind of out of date.
Yeah, thanks.
Dan Ramashkano, and I'm a co-author of this internet draft, but I'm kind of wondering what purpose really the gap analysis serves at this point in time, especially if we adopt it as a working group item. We reach consensus to go ahead, because that was a very useful tool while we were doing the BOF and trying to identify what are the problem space to work at. But now it's also, as you said, it's a changing environment. So it will, in 1 year, it will be different. And 1 year after publication, it will be different. So I'm not sure what purpose it will serve.
Yeah, I'm also not sure about that. So just waiting for comments. So.
Okay, thank you, Georgios. So just a couple of observations. The first is, I've seen some comments on the list that it would be nice to have a problem statement. It's still a little unclear to me as to kind of what purpose this document is going to serve, because we're working on the solution already. We've got data models, we've got the information model. There was a comment that the charter maybe wasn't clear or comprehensive enough, and this document certainly provides, you know, a very good, deep sort of perspective of why we're here and why Supa was instantiated. But it's written and it's available and it's enshrined in the data tracker anyway. Do we actually need to continue to work and develop this document and actually publish, you know, as a formal, you know, RFC, because you want to adopt the document? So that's a question that I would have, and I think we need to ask the working group.
Diego Lopez. Formally, my understanding of adopting the document simply that the group thinks that is useful. It doesn't guarantee that it's going to be an RFC or people that published or whatever. And well, I would say it's valuable to that extent. I would recommend adopting it, but asking the authors to take it easy, slow down, and if in some cases this could be useful as an introductory material for something, some other documents. That would be my recommendation.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Diego. This is Joel Halpern. I was going to say basically the same thing with one refinement. One of the advantages of adopting it is that we then make sure that the content reflects the working group's preferences, the working group's understandings. Right now, it is the author's understandings. And if somebody else who's not been involved here comes, what they're seeing is the author's understandings. If we adopt it and we put in a little bit of the effort needed to fix it, it's ours. Somebody coming in sees this is the working group's understanding. Whether we publish it as an RFC, whole different question. We can decide that down the road.
Yeah.
I think it is very useful to us and to this work going forward to have the document.
So I'm cognizant that we have a limited number of resources and people participating with Supa, and I don't want to dilute the effort by having too many documents that are we're working on concurrently. If there's a need to have this document that's going to feed into some of the, the milestones, the charter items that we specifically stated when we created the working group, I'm interested also to hear Benoit's perspective, because he trumps. Please.
Xie Chongfeng from Telecom. I think that this document will can provide some guidance on about how to use Supa in the network in the future, or what kind of scenario, what kind use case. So I think that will be very valuable for our network. So I hope that this can be adopted in the future. Thank you.
Thanks.
So that's probably true. So maybe it could become an applicability document or change it from here's a problem statement to make it something that would be valuable, that people picking this up would then understand how to use it, use cases, whatever. So my recommendation would be to change it that way.
May I say something? We have already an applicability document, but we could not submit it in time. So we have an applicability document that will actually describe the examples and more examples that I presented in a more
Then
precise way.
I'd fold this into that or whatever's right.
Right,
and have
right.
the document.
So we have an applicability document, we have a problem statement document, we have a framework document. That's a lot of documents. I mean, I'd be much more comfortable if we were to look at, where we can actually merge this effort and keep the text, but actually have, a document or 2 documents rather than, 3 documents at this stage, plus the information model, plus the data model. But, Mehmet.
As to Nokia, my statement goes actually in a similar direction. The document title says problem statement, but I heard already there is a need for an overview. There is a need to explain how to use Supa. Both of these does not fit actually under problem statement. In problem statement, I would like to see what the problem is. So we need to kind of decide what kind of documents we need to be able to address what is required. There seems to be some additional information required which goes beyond problem statement.
Benoit Claes. So the last 3 persons have been stressing the need stressing the need to document how we apply Supa. And in my sense, exactly the content of an applicability statement, which is in the charter, which says you take 1 or 2 use cases, and then you explain how Supa works for these use cases. I believe that we're past for a long time like the problem statement. There is a working group because there is a problem. We know about that, right? So I don't see the value of actually publishing this. We recognize there's a problem, right? What is the solution is way more interesting, in my view.
Okay, we're going to have to cut the line off there. Sorry, but let's move this discussion to the list.
Okay, thank you, Pankaj.
Thank you, Georgios. Rakesh. So the good news, Rakesh, is that you have all of the time remaining in the working group session.
It's Rakesh Kumar from Juniper Network, and I just want to give background. I just started attending IETF, and as Juniper, we are developing security controller, and I had some interest in the I2NSF and talked to a lot of customers. So one of the challenge which we have seen that is the security policy configuration is a very complex task, and if you have a multi-vendor solution and virtualized, non-virtualized, legacy, switch, router, firewall, this is a very complicated topic. So how do we really make so that the customers can really use the system, whether we call the controller or management system, that doesn't matter to me. But how do you provide interfaces to the node-bound side or to the OSS, BSS application controller, whatever you want to call that, and make those interfaces so that it does not matter how the network is built, what the topology is, and whether it's virtual function, physical function, or whether the function would be realized in the switches, routers, stuff like that. So that is the background to that. So I was talking to the chair of I2NSF, and then we talked to chair of Supa, and they suggested if I could use the policy framework which is defined in Supa to use that for the client-facing interfaces. So I just want to go through a little bit background to what the I2NSF we are trying to do and how I see I can use Supa to fulfill those requirements. So just bear with me for a few minutes. So agenda talks about security controller architecture. To me, this is just like one service functions, which is defined in the problem statement, could be any service layer, and service layer could provide basically a policy-based interface. So I'll go through security controller architecture, what is the I2NS framework we have defined, and then there is I2NS of client-facing interfaces, where I think if I can leverage Supa policy-driven framework, that would be a great thing. And the draft we have proposed that in the I2NS framework, which captures some of the requirement. So very quickly, in our opinion, what we are trying to do is there is a security controller, which
really trying to abstract all that details, whether it's a physical, virtual, or whether it's which vendor the device is. Security controller is going to manage all the thing going southbound side. So we are calling the I2NSF NSF facing interface, right? So NSF facing interface understand that a particular capability exists in a network security function, and there could be another layer of abstraction which could happen where this NSF interface are generic. So it doesn't matter these blue box are a virtual function, a physical function, a router, a switch, or a specific vendor firewall, or a networking element. And on the node-bound side or on the client side, that's what we're trying to say. If we can bring those interfaces, like I said earlier, security is already configured using policy, and right now these are vendor-specific policy, like Juniper has, Cisco has, Huawei, Fortinet, Palo Alto. There's a lot of vendors there. They have their own specific way to configure each device, and those security policy in itself are very complex, and they require a lot of understanding of networking, device, how the topology is. So the main idea is how to use work which is done in the Supa and to make end customer or the user life easy. That's the whole idea behind this. So there is what we are saying is in the I2SF, the client interface I just explained, that is security control interface to the client. And what our idea is, we don't really care. Like I know people have talked about, I just wanted to say one line about this user intent, what we're calling that. I know this word has a lot of different meaning to different folks. What we mean by user intent, and that's why I was talking to Will earlier, is we don't have to boil the ocean. What we have to do is we can solve a simple problem, just like end customer want to program a policy based on the user group access. Let's say in any enterprise, they have different department. You have legal department, you have finance department, and you want to say that users which belong to finance department or HR department, they cannot have application access or the data access in a different department. I mean, this is a very typical security policy. Everybody deploys that. So to us, that is intent. Do you want to program a security policy based on figuring out, hey, what is the user IP address that's given instance of time, or where the application is deployed, what is the IP address at the given time? And if the application change or the application move, is IP address change or the user change, somebody has to track that and reconfigure the policy. So the bottom line is what user want, not what the device capability is from the CLI perspective, from the 5-tuple, 6-tuple. All users say is, hey, I want to have HR group. I want to give access to this application group. So it doesn't mean that we have to provide this natural language processing. What we're saying is how to model the intent into the client interfaces. So when we talk about intent, that's what I mean here. So the next thing is, like I think in the problem statements, you presented that it should be network topology unaware. When clients say that it does not care whether that NSF is where it is located and how it is built. And we want to leverage Supa policy interface there. So these are all the user intent modeling. And the idea was here is, these are the intent which we think would be useful to create for the northbound or the client-facing interfaces. And if I can use Supa-based policy to model this thing, that would be great. So some of this thing is metadata-driven. So as I said earlier, user intent could be modeled just, hey, metadata-driven instead of providing the fixed IP address. So metadata could be related to users, device, application, locations, and the group definition could come from anywhere. So policy should be able to capture those details. Hey, I want to define a specific group, and the identity of that groups come from some system. And then next thing is policy modeling requirement. What does user really want to create a policy? Or when he wants this policy to enforce, we can call that event condition actions, or we can call that more sophisticated one, where user defines, hey, I want my policy to be active when I configure that. Or user could say that I'm going to define a time profile, and based on the time profile, policy automatically kicks in. So you don't have to do those manual tasks. You can automate that. Or you can say that, hey, I want to create a more sophisticated system where based on certain event I see coming from different system, or I have analytics engines which give me event. Doesn't matter how the event happens. I want to use those events to drive my policy enforcement. And the next thing is what user want in rules. Like I said earlier, he's going to build rules on the building blocks of the object which we are going to define. Like you have, like I said there, you have groups. Groups are the basically where the policy would be applied. What kind of policy you want to apply? You want to do threat management, you want to block botnet access, DDoS handling, malware. We just give an example. What kind of action user want to take that? Permit, deny, meeting, request profile. Again, we are not trying to go through exhaustively. I'm just giving how we want to model that interface and if we can leverage Supa. That's the whole idea behind this. And of course, user could say that, hey, when I want to talk to my security controller, I want you to have this kind of authentication, authorization, and their operation requirement, multi-tenancy, telemetry, notification. So basically, we are trying to capture this client interface requirement and how to leverage, if it is possible to leverage Supa's work. So I have read the draft. You said that in the draft, there are two policies specified. Management policy, my understanding is, and the embedded policy, the discussion we had earlier. So the way I interpret it is management policy is exactly what I thought, what I want. Where management policy is totally abstracting, it's not a device specific. Embedded policy is more device specific. So this is all I have to say.
Thank you, Rakesh. Will?
Could you please go back to the architecture page? Actually, a little update is that we had a long discussion about this figure, and I, as the author of the framework, I cannot add, at the moment, I cannot add those interface about the user intent stuff into our framework. So, but beside that, those part, except those part, the other part, you are welcome to, comments and review our draft and give your comments to us.
Yeah, so when I say intent was like metadata driven, like John was saying earlier, it's like how you interpret the word. The user doesn't have to know the spaces is on 5 tuple, 6 tuple. That's what. Thank you very much.
Okay, great. So, and we'll continue to engage, I think, with other people in I2NSF across with Supa as well. Thank you. So that concludes our session today. If you haven't signed the blue sheet, please come to the front. Okay, Will has the other one. Great. Thank you, guys and girls.
We can't have any people are remaining.
Okay, so let's, yeah, 36. Oh,
difficult to grab you.
I've been crazy busy, yeah.
Yeah, have time to talk a bit.
Not so much actually.
What?
I've got dinner now.
Dinner?
Yeah.
When's the, no?
Well, it's 8 o'clock, but I need to go and put my things back.
Oh,
in
maybe
my
we
hotel.
can talk while you go back to your room.